On today's Accidental Talmudist podcast, we welcome sci-fi author and creative director Dani Kollin, who's also a dear friend. And we explored what it was like for him and his brother, his co-writer, to create an amazing universe, a sci-fi universe, which was very important to me. I mean, sci-fi was an important part of my development. And together with a guy who created an elaborate world, we looked at big questions like, what does the creator of our world, the world, think about when he's creating? What does he want from his creations? And so, the act of creation leads to all these wonderful questions that ultimately come to love, relationship, what's expected of us, and what we can expect from others. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm sure you're going to enjoy it.
Accidental Talmudist wisdom you don't want to miss. Now my pal Sal, take it away.
Welcome to the Accidental Talmudist podcast. I'm Sal Litvak, and today I am joined by one of my favorite people in the whole world. He looks around. Where are you talking about? It's my dear friend, Dani Kollin, who is a science fiction author, and I would add extraordinaire, a blogger, a writer, an advertising copywriter, a dad and a foster dad, and really one of my favorite interlocutors. See how I dropped that nice big word there?
Good $10 word, my friend. Yeah.
But we've been getting together and just chatting for a long time, and I think we just enjoy rolling the universe into a ball with each other.
Indeed.
So how you doing today, Don?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm doing great.
I see you're drinking tea.
Yes.
And not coffee. And you just put a tea bag in a cup, which is probably like a little bit disappointing for you, because if there was a steampunk way to make tea, I would think you'd prefer that.
No. We could have gone on such a great path about the coffee versus the tea, but steampunk is just it's just a cool what-if universe where, for people who aren't familiar with steampunk, it's this notion of, well, what if steam had taken over and not electricity? And then all that beautiful artwork, the Rococo, the ornamentalism, all that, ironwork and copper, if that had kept going, what would society have been like? There's these dreams of it being perfect and not electrified. But no, steampunk novels tend to be pretty dark. But so steampunk is this, it's not just novels, it's building things. It's creating gorgeous, like 20,000 League Under the Sea structures, so...
Right,
yeah.
It's a little bit the opposite of, if you look at that Blade Runner universe...
Dystopic.
It is dystopic, it's dismal,
Yes.
You just don't want to find yourself in that future.
I don't know.
A steampunk future can be dark, but at least it'll be beautiful.
Yeah, you've got that. I mean, for all us sci-fi geeks, even Blade Runner is beautiful because there are finally flying cars. So
Okay.
We'll deal with anything if you give us our flying cars, even like, a society crumbling into the ground and pollution so thick you have to wear masks. But at least we got our flying cars.
I think there is a question if once they're flying, will they also be driven by us? There'll be a lot of pressure to make them autonomous. And it's funny because just yesterday, I was a guest judge at our kids' school at Pressman, where both of our kids went. And it was a Talmudic case that was brought about an autonomous car that, the woman was listening to a podcast and not paying attention because she was in a self-driving car. And the car swerved to avoid hitting a pedestrian and hit another car and caused this man a lot of physical and emotional and automotive damage. And then the question is, who is liable, the owner of the car or the manufacturer of the car? There were no other options.
By the way, that wasn't my first question.
What's your first question?
What was she listening to? But keep going. Yeah,
well,
I'm really
they
curious.
gave
What
it
was
as a
so
given
absorbing that she didn't even pay attention to the road? Like, as a author, I want to know the answer to that. But keep going because.
They made it a given that if you're engrossed in a podcast, you can't be driving. But since when is audio, making it impossible for you to drive your car? But at any rate, she wasn't. Some other place wasn't paying attention. And I think that, first of all, if she had been paying attention and seized control of the car, if that was even possible, I don't think she would have produced a better outcome. I mean, I do think that the autonomous car has faster reflexes than the human. The question is, what is it programmed to do?
It's not. Yes, it has faster reflexes, but it's not as smart as the human. So its reflexes may work great to avoid the object it thinks is problematic, which in this case was another car. But there are
No,
so
it was
many.
a human. It avoided hitting a pedestrian.
It hit a
It
pedestrian.
would have killed a pedestrian.
So it avoided hitting a pedestrian and it hit another car.
Yes. So it
So-
saved a life,
Right.
but damaged another guy.
Right. So these are these cases where the human brain is still better at making snap judgments because the computer, it's machine learning, it can only feed in all the scenarios that might be problematic, and it gets most of them right in driving. But as we know of the famous case with the Tesla, the car drove right into the side of a truck because it was a white truck, and it thought it was a sky.
Right.
So in this
the human
case,
wouldn't make that error.
Right.
Right.
That's why I'm arguing would it have been better if she had gained control, and could she have had a better outcome? I don't know, but the human brain is so magnificent that it's probably not as simple as human car, computer tried to avoid hitting it. There were probably about 30 other factors that happened within microseconds that a human may have been able to counteract in a way that the computer or the car could not have.
Sure. And hence, we can enter right into a Talmudic analysis of a case that our sages never could have imagined. And that's what's so beautiful about that kind of analysis. I'll also add, in speaking about your background, you're a rabbi's son.
Yes.
Right? And so I imagine that some of this discussion was going on around your Shabbos table even as a kid.
My goodness, was it ever. Yeah.
Do you remember some conversation from back then?
I only remember that they were heated and that they were never boring.
Okay.
And the tradition in our family now is when people come over for Friday night dinner and they're just not used to that level of discourse or that, like, just dive in. So a lot of times there's a deer in the headlights look of our guests who've never eaten with us because there are so many deep and involved and passionate conversations that we just launch right into. We don't give anybody like a booklet on, okay, you're about to eat at the Collins, this is what you should expect. So I don't remember specifically those discussions. I do remember one particularly difficult day, and that was when at the ripe old age of, I think, 17, I decided to wear a cross in one of my ears, because I have earrings, just because it was just a symbol man, and my dad flipped a gasket, or blew a gasket.
It's okay to have an earring, but not
Right. And so
another
that
religion.
I tried to make that a discussion, but that was not open for discussion, apparently.
Okay. All right, so let me mention, I was friends with Dani for several years, and, enjoying each other's company, enjoying all the conversations that we have, and he told me that he was working on a book at that time, writing with your brother, Eitan, and then that book finally was done, and Dani also knows that I'm a writer and a director, and I make movies, and I think you said to me, I think you'd enjoy my book. And it was a good instinct because, science fiction was so important to me growing up. I would say that everything that I am and have become is at least heavily influenced, if not sparked by my early love of science fiction. It was really through my life. I always considered myself spiritual, and I think that came from all the sci-fi reading that I was doing. Totally inappropriate reading at my age, because my dad had this great rule. We grew up in New York, and there was this great old Barnes & Noble at Fifth Avenue and 18th Street. And my dad was quite, tight with $1 in everything, except if we went to a bookstore, he said, you can buy anything you want as long as you read it. That was the deal. Actually, I think it was a great piece of dadding.
Yeah, that's
a great piece of fathering.
dadding.
And so I took that deal to heart. And the thing that I was drawn to was sci-fi, because it's, for people who aren't sci-fi fans, they just think it's about science and fantasy and quirky technical stuff. But it's about creating worlds and about philosophy and about imagining a what-if situation and then spinning it out and out and out and out and all the implications of the kind of those philosophical choices that you make at the outset that the author makes in creating his universe. And it always led me to think, well, what about the author of our universe? And what choices did he make? And what was he thinking and he intending? And that's why at a young age, it seemed to me that, well, first of all, from my science reading, I got a good sense of how big the universe is and how much stuff there is in it. And it made no sense to me that so much stuff would burst into being for no reason at all, just randomly. I'm good with the Big Bang, but that it should happen for no reason seemed like nonsense to me. So I figured the universe was willed, and I was always interested in the creator, and I figured he was interested in the creatures, and so we should get to know each other. But I mention all of that because that's how I always approached science fiction. It was special to me. It was big and meaningful. And so when Dani handed me his book, I was interested to read somebody's sci-fi, but if you live in L.A. and you work in Hollywood and people hand you scripts and books, and they're your friends, it's usually a problem because most things that people hand you suck, and then you have to find something nice to say about it, and you have to find time to read after the first page in which you discover how dismal it is. But when Dani handed me his book, and that night I opened it and started reading the first page of The Unincorporated Man.
Let me just clarify, my book and my brother. I write with my brother, Eitan.
Exactly.
Yep.
So the Kollin brothers. And it was your first book,
yep.
right? Called The Unincorporated Man. And it's a near future.
Mm-hmm.
And what's amazing about the world that they created is so many sci-fi worlds, man has expanded to the whole galaxy or the whole universe. You look at the Star Wars universe, it ranges over a large area, large part of the cosmos. What Dani and Eitan did is set it so that man had expanded just in the solar system, but had reasons to expand, and then a lot of politics came into it, and a lot of philosophy, and a lot of gadgetry, and it was all about 300 years in the future?
Yeah, that's right.
About 300 years in the future, and I was fascinated and could not put that book down. And when I came to the end of it, I'm like, you're writing a sequel, right? Because I want to keep reading. I've talked a lot. This is the longest introduction I think I've ever done.
All right, I'm done. Thank you very much for having me. No.
So, Dani, take us through it a little bit. Like, when you set out to create a world, what were you guys thinking, and what were some of the choices that you made?
All right. So even before I answer that question, let me unpack some of what you said, because there's real beauty in your love of sci-fi, and that all kind of translates up to the answer to that question. So when you talk about why you love sci-fi, one of the things, let's put it this way. There's a very famous author named Philip K. Dick. Most people know a lot of the movies that he's associated with even after he passed away.
Is he
Blade
credited
Runner.
with inventing cyberpunk?
No, that wasn't Philip K. Dick.
Okay.
I forgot the guy's name, but it wasn't him. But movies like Minority Report and Blade Runner and A Scanner Darkly are all based on short stories by Philip K. Dick. So Blade Runner was Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Philip K. Dick was a terrific writer, and he wrote this very short 2-page essay about what good science fiction is. In a nutshell, what he said, and it was really interesting, was that good science fiction creates a sort of ramification engine, wherein if the author did his job or her job well, you begin to imagine what it would be like if you were in that universe. So when Eitan and I wrote The Unincorporated Man, that was, our litmus test was, if you are reading this, can you imagine yourself in it? And so that's the first thing that grabs you as a sci-fi reader, is you're not just reading a story, you're sort of ancillarily placing yourself within it because it's that interesting to you.
Right.
So that probably grabbed you also. One of the reasons that sci-fi fans exist is because, to a certain extent, either they feel a little marginalized from standard society, or they dream of a better world. And so often fantasy and sci-fi create a sort of, whether it's dystopic or not, often dystopic if it's hard science fiction, which is fact-based science fiction.
Dystopic would mean if we keep going in the
the
direction we're
world fell
going,
apart,
where will
and
we
now
end up?
the
Right.
world fell apart. Now we have a new world, and here's how we're starting it. So it's all about possibility. It's all about, well, if I could do it all over again, I'd make an incorporated system where everybody has shares in everybody else. Like that was our story, right? And then we throw our guy into it who wakes up into it 300 years, and he doesn't own anybody, and nobody owns him, and now he's the one free man. And what does freedom even mean in this type of world where people live forever, and the singularity, which is the perfection of science, has happened, and man has become God. We argue with that. We even introduce a rabbi character, but I digress. But it's that notion of possibility, of a better world, a different way of sorting things out that make more sense than what we're dealing with today. So that's the big picture of why science fiction is appealing to a lot of people, or fantasy. To answer your question about God, the creator of all of it, if you think about what's amazing about life, and even if you think about, I'll go down to like good leadership skills. Good leadership skills is letting people know that they have potential. What is potential? You have the possibility of doing amazing things. We've all had people that we've met in our lives who were energized by their presence because they believe in us. They believe in our possibility. And so I believe that is an intrinsic part of the universe. Possibility, where we can go, what we can build, the love, that we can give and see what that creates. That's part of the very DNA of our universe. That is God. And so that is a direct parallel with the sort of possibility that we see in these beautiful little stories, the storytelling, and the ultimate author. It's all about possibility and where that goes. So, having said all that, where we get to the question of why the Unincorporated Man, what was it that inspired us to create it? So my brother used to teach in Compton High School, and he would always, God bless him, he would always set up a chess club, no matter what school he was in. And inevitably, kids would gravitate towards it who didn't realize that could happen in getting beat up on the recess, yard, or listening to music maybe, or whatever, but a chess club. But what he found was that there were kids in the club who were geniuses, but nobody had recognized that genius. And he was so frustrated. He often says, it's a beautiful quote, he loves teaching, he just doesn't let it get in the way of his job. A teacher. So he tried to think of a system in which actual and true talent would be created despite the machinations. Is it machinations or machinations?
I say machinations.
The machinations of the administration, of all that other stuff. How would you actually, what kind of system would recognize true potential and then reward it and encourage it? And so he came up with this notion of incorporation. Well, what if somebody was recognized from a young age as being particularly strong in a particular area, and that person was already invested in, and people would, all of a sudden it would be out on the internet that this guy in this area or this young kid has this incredible potential. People start investing. His stocks go up. He's 8, and then the parents have a vested interest in making sure he eats well and he's not abused and he goes to school, because then they have automatic shares in him, and then their valuation goes up. So he created this beautiful world. He didn't know what to do with it, but he had this system, which, interestingly enough, when we started doing our research, Milton Friedman had suggested in one of his early books in the 60s called Capitalism and Freedom, I believe was the name of it. And it is the opening of our entire, 4-book series, which is, spans the course of literally 1 million words. But that's where it started. It started with that idea of how can we not lose these kids? What could possibly be created? That was what we talked about earlier, potential that would allow people to fulfill their true awesome selves.
And like so many things, I mean, there's just I guess in sci-fi as in life, the law of unintended consequences, because the system that you're describing is a great positive, right? To buy into people and give them the opportunity to realize their potential. But in your books becomes a system of taking liberty away.
Correct.
Because everybody is owned by their shareholders. And then if they own more than 50% of you, you're not free. You're
Well, so that's the interesting debate, right? So our antagonists basically, we had one character and a group of government or corporations behind him. He argued it's not black and white. So let's say I own 51% of you. It's no good to me if I, make you do a dance or make you an actual slave. It's much better for me if, I see in Sal, he's charismatic and he's a great podcaster and a great writer. I'm not going to, if I have to move him to the middle of the country because he'll get a wider audience and looks like that's going to work, then I'm going to move all his friends too. And I'm going to put him in a nicer house because it's in my best interest to make sure that Sal does well because I have a majority stake in him doing well. So, and the system wasn't even set up so that, you, Sal, could say, but I like living in L.A. I really don't want to move. And you could, even if you didn't have a majority of yourself, technically argue that your shareholders are making a bad decision. So that existed, but what our protagonist argued was there is something fundamental about freedom, God-given, and our protagonist, by the way, was a secular guy, but he was arguing you can't sell freedom. And even though you've come up with a better system than the one that existed before, what you're ultimately going to end up with is people not having, you're arguing now that they have enough control. But where does slavery begin and, this nice incorporated universe end?
Right, because at the end of the day, incorporation is about ownership.
Correct.
Right, and then so the question, can you own a person? It doesn't matter how many owners there are, but can a person be owned is the fundamental question.
And the answer in the incorporated world at its inception was yes, and that's not a bad thing, because the ownership of a person gave them a nice house and a better education and clothes on their back, because the investors, it was in their best interest to make sure that the ownership of these people or this group of people that they did well, and it was like the unseen hand. So, that's the debate. The whole book is about what price freedom, what good was done by pulling the masses out of the dystopia that we said happened, where everything fell apart. And now you would argue, and there would be people who are going like, yeah, I don't own a majority of myself, but look at this beautiful house I'm living in. And I'm educated, and I got a great job, and my kids are taken care of.
Now, what's interesting is, this is the philosophical underpinning of the book.
Yeah.
But that's not what we're reading about. What we're reading about is a guy who wakes up 300 years in the future. Everything has changed. Some things are amazing. Medicine is great.
Flying cars.
You can take an elevator up to space.
Yep.
You can go out to visit Jupiter, and there's reasons to go out there, and it's not just some freezing hellhole. It's like really interesting things around the solar system. You can do a sex change for a night, right? Mm-hmm. Just to have a good time and see how the other half lives. I mean, you had so many clever ideas that just sort of propel the narrative forward. And, and the great, guy-girl relationship at the heart of it, and will that romance go forward, et cetera. And then if you only read the first book, you have no idea where this is headed.
Calamity.
Total calamity and civil war. Yeah. And what was fun was, your brother is a history teacher, right?
Yes.
And it's funny because I have visited his class with my film, Saving Lincoln, which he showed to his kids, I think, every year for a while, and brought me in to speak with them. And so the two of you became great students of the American Civil War.
Yes.
And then explored those dynamics and those battles and the tactics of fighting a civil war and what it takes to be a general in a civil war, which is incredibly painful because you're fighting against people you care about.
Yeah.
And then extrapolate that kind of civil war and civil war dynamics as the human race battles itself, in this bigger context of the solar system. It was fascinating, amazing stuff.
And one of the big parallels was, if you think about the Civil War, there was this main idea that was, for all intents and purposes, everybody got along with everybody else. They all believed in God. They all, spoke the same language, had pretty much very similar kind of values. But this one idea, secession melding into slavery, ended up killing 500,000 people, brutally. And so that was what was so
over
fascinating.
700,000?
Over 700,000.
In a country of 30 million.
Right.
So it's like if today over 7 million people were killed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very good way of putting it in context. And so that was what was so fascinating to us, was to try to recreate, because it was the same thing. So where everything falls apart is our guy wakes up and he goes, oh, well, that's an interesting way of doing things. I don't want to incorporate, but you guys, as we say in Yiddish, Gegezintahey. Go do what you want. Not for me. I'm just going to live my life. And the fact that he says no causes a rift in society, because people are saying, why is he saying no? And he says, well, because I believe that freedom is intrinsic. You can't buy my freedom. As much as you can paint this as a beautiful thing, no thanks. But the mere fact that he says no causes a rift that begins to just grow. And that's where the story gets interesting. Why do people care? Why did it cause a rift? Why? He should have just said no, and people are like, okay, whatever, moving on. But they didn't. They wanted to know why he said no, and his answer was quite threatening to the society at large that was running things. Whether that society at large, the corporations, knew that they were heading towards eventual true slavery or not, you almost don't get that from the antagonist, Hector. He really believes in the system, and he thinks Justin is bringing back the bad old days of taxation and the things that tore everything apart. But the antagonist can't see that in playing God and in essentially creep, we called it a dictatorship of the content, or boiling a frog slowly in a pot of lukewarm water into boiling water. That even the antagonist can't see that that's where that's heading, but Justin can, because he has the perspective of having lived in that age and now looking at this age objectively.
Right. And the power of a well-spoken, charismatic person to take an idea and make it catch fire cannot be overstated or understated. I never know how to use that kind of syntax.
Now that you've said it, I don't know how to use it either. Stated.
It should not be understated.
Something
and it
stated.
Cannot be overstated. Right?
Yeah, there you go.
But it's true. I mean, so many of us will just accept the status quo on and on and on and on and on until somebody names it. And really nothing has changed other than that guy named it. It's not like tanks are rolling up at the door and, okay, I got to roll up my sleeves and fight.
Right.
But because somebody crystallized the idea, no, now I do have to do something about it. And there's so many movements that catch fire in society in that way. A couple other ideas that you explore in the book, or that you create in the book, and that catch fire and are so important. One is how our society ended up breaking down. And there were some government things and taxation things, but one big part of it was that people got hooked on virtual reality.
Yeah.
Right? And so you guys treat the idea of being in a virtual reality simulation that's so real that you're living the dream, is an addiction in itself, right? And like you don't have to take a drug to then also go experience and have fun at the movies or watching TV. But the fact that you can create whatever dream you're in, and it's so much better than the real world that you never want to leave it, and you become a wirehead. I think that's what you called it, right? Maybe
no.
not. But that idea.
Yeah.
That idea that it becomes totally dangerous. And we're already starting to see a little bit of that. That's not far-fetched at all.
Yeah. By the way, that's an English word that should be Yiddish. Far-fetched. Just
exactly.
Playing all week.
But I mean, it's, and again, we're coming back to this idea of who is the creator, So when you can create a reality that you deem superior to what's around you, and you could just stay in it day after day after day, as long as, you can remember to eat and go to the bathroom, or maybe not even, but somebody does it for you. I mean, we start to, The Matrix is another movie that plays with this a little bit. And we end up, just plugging ourselves in and essentially selling our freedom, as long as I can get the experience that gives me the candy, do you think that that's a real danger? Do you think people will get so hooked on screens and devices and eventually VR and Oculus and whatever else and just forget to live?
Of course. Look at today. And by the way, I'm a creative director of technology at an ad agency, so I am massively in love with technology and science. It's why I write in this particular genre of science fiction called hard science fiction, because I love the possibility of what will be soon, to extrapolate from the science today of where it's going. So that remains possibility for me. But if you just look at today, try to get the attention of a kid who's looking at a screen, right? They're not even wrapped in a world. They're holding a physical object in their hand and they're looking at a piece of glass that's feeding them content, and they're sucked in. And they can't, there's that dopamine hit from the likes and from the swapping through and, the sort of lashon
rolling
hara'ing,
through
the
other
rolling
humans
Yeah.
so fast. You
Yeah.
can look at somebody and dismiss him
Correct.
again and again and again and again and again.
Correct.
Right.
So if we're already there and there's a separation, imagine where we'll be if we're encased in something and there's no separation. There's no way to tell the difference. It's that good. So without a doubt, we're heading there. And I think we're heading there almost blindly, because the beauty of capitalism is the sort of mad dash to what's going to sell and what works. And that's a good thing because, again, you can see the negative side of it, but the positive side of it is Steve Jobs, the iPhone, automation, things that are making our lives a lot better and putting a lot more food on the table and employing a lot of people around the world and giving people security. Great. That's the mad rush into the next thing. So the mad rush into virtual reality and, to a certain extent, augmented reality is, are there brakes on it? What are the ethics? We have bioethics about genetic editing, right? Thank God we're trying to get a handle on that and CRISPR-9 and the stuff that's happening there. Are there ethics panels on, virtual reality? I don't think so. I think right now we're just trying to see who can do it best first, where it's not clunky and you don't have wires behind your head, and someone will figure it out. But the question then becomes, it's human nature to want these highs, whether it's people who are ODing on fentanyl or people who really love music and will spend $20,000 on a Macintosh amplifier or the best cigar. We are built for these peaks. And so VR offers one of the ultimate ones because, like you said, any fantasy can come true. Why would you leave? And if you don't leave, how are you going to be productive? And that's kind of where we went in our story, looking back on what happened, in the world as a result of the VR plague, we called it.
Right.
People went in and nobody thought to think, well, what happens if they don't come out? Bob doesn't show up to work. He's no longer programming, and that's a pretty important program because that's software to protect a virus, or he was about to he was on the cusp of creating the new smartwatch or whatever it was, but nobody's seen him in
Right.
weeks.
So, there the argument is that if enough people remove themselves from being productive in the world,
Yes.
well, then the world can't sustain itself.
Correct.
But a different question would be, well, what if the world was sustaining itself, right? I remember reading in college, Buckminster Fuller argued, I think quite persuasively, that it's only because we're so inefficient that there's so many people working and needing to work.
That's a great
and
line.
that things were organized properly, maybe 10% of the humans would need to work to create the food and the shelter and all the things that were necessary. And the other 90%, their job would be to stay out of trouble. Don't screw it up. Don't start wars. Don't commit crimes. Just enjoy yourself. Don't get in the way. And let's just say for a second that is possible, right? So, now, like the world of the Matrix starts to. It's not that all the people are being used as batteries, but imagine if all the people are just living a fantasy life, having a great time, having a very enjoyable life. I guess the programmers get really good at giving them a fulfilling life within their fantasy life. Then the question would have to be asked: well, if X is good, means the most people are getting the most pleasure, right? If people are enjoying themselves, then that world would seem to be okay, as long as the ones who are working have signed on for that. They like the privilege of working.
Yeah.
Right? If they're not being abused and enslaved to keep the rest of them enjoying themselves.
They're not being used as batteries.
But let's just say that they're good. I want to be a worker. I want to be one of the 10%. Everyone else can just have fun. For me, it's because I believe in God and that God created this world and that God has purpose and desire for us that we don't invent, that world is bad. But if this world is a random creation, then what would be so bad?
So,
90% of the people are just having a good time.
Let's unpack it. I honestly don't think 90% of the people would have a good time. If you think about, the simplest thinking about it is, people who retire and just can't, right? It's part of our nature to want to create. That's the author, to do things, to be productive. You look at the people who've won the lottery, and what happens, how quickly they get rid of their money or lose their money, or how unhappy they end up becoming. Because our fantasies of a world in which robots take care of everything and we don't have to work anymore doesn't truck with reality, which is the human desire to be productive in some way.
But that could be happening in their fantasy.
So here's that was my next part of this. The smart play would be then, okay, if you're a teacher, you can now teach what you teach all over the world, or, you can show up in a country where you want to do a good deed or whatever it is, and then now you're productive but in a different world. That is arguably potentially good. Is it better than reality? Don't know. There was an interesting meme or a video I just saw last week. A guy spent 1 week in virtual reality. Even with its, arguably fledgling technology and not great, but he was committed to spend an entire week, going on yoga retreats and hiking and doing all these things. And it was so fascinating, the moment where he gets to take it off and walk outside and take in the air and smell everything. Now, again, in our world, all that's taken care of. You can't tell. So, we have to put it in perspective. Right now, I think we're not good enough to recreate what the human senses demand. Smell,
but we
noise.
Can posit that
we can
VR would
posit
get
that
good
would
enough,
happen.
that,
Good enough.
Indistinguishable.
So in that world, your argument is valid. As long as you're connecting with other human beings and producing things, it almost doesn't matter, because then if you take that argument a little bit further, there are people who argue our bodies are kind of a waste. They break down. The second we can figure out how to map our brains and our memories, let's just port them over into a computer and continue that fantasy virtual reality actually on computers.
And that was the second idea. I don't know, do you talk about it? The other intelligences that
Sure,
arise in
of
your
course.
world?
Yeah,
it happens a little later in the series.
We posit that at some point, because this is the interesting, like, one of the reasons I love Blade Runner so much is that the humans created by the humans are more human than the people who created them. That's what's so interesting. Even in the new movie, there's a scene between a replicant and an AI in which he brings her to life. And that moment was the most human moment in the entire movie. And this was a guy created in a vat, and she's not real. Right. And everybody else around them are monsters, and those are the human beings. So for us, it was fun, trying to figure out how we were going to bring, AI into sentience. And, and that was a great exploration in and of itself. But once we brought AI into sentience, then we said, well, what would they do? It's not Terminator where, okay, now we're going to destroy the world. It's, oh my goodness, these humans created us. We're their progeny. We need to take care of them. And never let them know we're around, because that would be a bad thing, because they'd probably freak out. And so it was a chance for us to view humanity reborn through what humanity created.
Right. And that, it's coming. It's coming. It's coming fast. For all we know, it's here already.
I don't know how fast it's coming, because I work in robotics also. One of my clients for a couple of years was SoftBank Robotics, and I dove deep not only into marketing robotics, but learning all about it, talking to the technologists and the guys who are programming it. We are very, very, very far away.
Okay, but
the movies are good, but
certainly
not,
in sci-fi it's possible, and maybe it'll be possible in the real world. I mean, to have, I don't know how you define it, but an intelligence that's aware of itself, that has feeling, that cares. There's a lot of possibilities, or what defines a being that has been brought into being.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't be body bound. So So by definition, has the possibility of being immortal and learning at an astronomical rate.
It already is immortal and learns at an astronomical rate. That's what Watson is. But Watson is by no stretch of the imagination human. You know, Watson, there was an interesting article, I don't know if you saw it last week in the Wall Street Journal, a woman talking about Watson couldn't beat her grandson at what she called Attie chess. Attie, A-T-T-I-E, is her grandson's name. Attie chess is he takes the pieces off the board and he throws them in the garbage can, and then he looks at them and then he puts them back on the board in a very specific way, because that's the way he sees it. Watson couldn't in a million years figure out what's going on.
Right.
That's the human brain just experimenting and trying different things and creating iPhones. You know, it's closer to fantasy and what we worry about or what we read about in science fiction than it is to reality. You know, if you do the research and you read Steven Pinker's book I'm in the middle of now, it's brilliant. I think it's On the Human Mind or you know, something like that. He spells it out very clearly how very, very far away we are. And I'm not worried, and I'm deep into it.
So let me ask you, you know, where are you holding these days in terms of your relationship with God? You know, is that different than when you were a kid? Is it different than before you started creating the unincorporated universe?
Yeah, wow. You got a day? It's a beautiful, amazing question. And I will actually, the Jewish way is to, you know, think about it or answer it from a side view. So I have a friend who's a devout Christian. And I was explaining to him that my life is every day is gratitude. I wake up and I am so grateful for my wife and my children and the opportunities that I've been given to make people's lives better. I can't imagine being happier ever, right? Every day. I'm high on life.
Wow.
Right?
How many people can say that? Not many.
I don't know. But that's my life, you know, and God plays a part of that.
Is that just something you feel, or is that a choice you make?
It's what I feel, and it's a choice I make because I'm aware of what I believe. I'm aware of what matters, and I believe I'm aware of what matters because of God and because of my religion. Am I as observant as I should be? No. And so this circles back to my devout Christian friend, and he said to me, have you ever asked God for anything? I said, no. He said, why? I said, well, I'm really happy with my life, and you know, we observe the Sabbath, and he goes, but have you ever asked God for anything? He doesn't have time for me. He said, you should think about asking him for something and what it would be that you would ask for. And I couldn't answer his question, and I'm still thinking about what I would ask him for, because it's not a boat, and it's not, you know, sure, it's easy to say solve cancer, but I'm not even sure that that's something I would ask, because it would be better that man solved it, that they used the potential that God gave us to really do that incredible thing. It's not that I'd say no, but for me personally, what would I ask for?
Or someone you know who's sick, that they should be healed?
Sure, but then that would be for someone else. And my friend was asking me, what do you want, Donnie?
Okay.
What would you personally ask God for you? And I kept thinking, nothing. I'm so happy with my life. More money, more this. Meh.
You're as productive as you'd like to be?
Yeah, meh.
That's great.
So I don't have the answer, but I know that I need to have that answer. Because if I'm going to have a true relationship with God, I need to ask him for things. Because otherwise it's not a relationship. It's me being happy that he created this world, and I'm getting along to get along, and I'm really, thank you, God, I'm appreciative of what you've created. And I'm getting on with my life.
You say that.
But there's not a relationship. And in order for there to be a relationship, I need to ask him for something.
I think so.
Yeah.
But I'm surprised that this is an issue for you. Are you familiar with the lobster theory?
Yes, of course, Jordan Peterson.
Oh, does he bring it down? Because he.
Oh, sorry. Well, he's all about the lobster. You give me your lobster theory.
I mean, I got it from Rabbi Dr. Abraham Twersky, and I wouldn't be surprised
he was
if it's the
before
same
Jordan.
idea.
So this is a different. I think that's a whole different thing.
Well, this idea is that how does the lobster grow? Is this what Jordan says? I mean, how does the lobster grow? It has an exoskeleton that doesn't stretch. So as the lobster grows, it begins to get very uncomfortable in its skin.
Not Jordan's theory, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it starts to like itch and squirm and be super uncomfortable. and be irritated with itself and everybody. But that is a great sign of growth, because what it means is that it's about to crack that exoskeleton, shed it, have a growth spurt, and then bring on the new skin for its next phase. And I've never seen you as somebody who's just satisfied, with the way things are. You can point out the flaws. In
100%.
in every culture, in every situation, in every organization, and even in yourself.
I'm passionate about things.
You're passionate about things, including yourself and your development and your growth.
Yes.
Right? So wouldn't a fair thing to ask God just to strengthen you to realize yourself, in the areas where you're uncomfortable, that you could do better?
Yes, and I'll put that on the list, because I'm really trying to think of these things. Like, it's to ask him for that it's not spitting in the face of what he's already given me a template for how to make those things better.
Yeah, I think he appreciates when we ask him for that. Help me be the me that you made better.
And there's the relationship.
Right.
And that's what's missing. So I like his template. I like his stories. I think the morals of those stories are a beacon of light for me to follow, to make my life better and appreciate the things I have. And I'm very satisfied with those. So for me to ask him to give me more strength would be to say, I didn't read section A, subsection B, which tells me how to get more strength, right? Because it's all there. All you have to do, my goodness, you've read the entire Talmud. It's all there. So what would I ask him? Point me to the part I missed? Maybe. I don't know what to ask him.
A big part of the faith is prayer.
I don't do it. I don't do it.
You don't do it?
Because I don't feel it. So I'm the guy in shul who's brought his scientific novel, and it's never
That's
a sci-fi
true. And you're
novel.
usually reading nonfiction in shul.
It's always nonfiction,
Right.
and it's always something universe-like. So it would be on the human mind, or calculating the cosmos, or something that is
Or that Mars story that you turned me on to that.
right.
What's that book called?
Packing for Mars. That one.
No, the one that became a movie with The
Martian.
The Martian.
Yeah, I didn't read The Martian in shul.
Okay.
I'll never read fiction in shul. I always want to read awe-inspiring stuff in shul, because I feel like I'm in the presence of God. I don't like all these thous and thou arts and you're awesome and all that. But I'm willing to read about how awesome you are.
So
because
do
this is
you ever
molecular.
talk to God?
Never.
You want to give it a try?
I do. And that's what my friend Lucas was telling me.
Yeah.
He was basically saying, you need to have a relationship. It's great that you appreciate God and that you're living a God-fearing life, and that God's
You
the
do a
beauty
lot.
of
You
it,
keep a kosher home.
I
You
keep
send
a
your
kosher
kids
home,
to
yeah.
a Jewish school.
without a doubt.
You're
'Cause
in shul on Shabbat.
all of those things have been extraordinarily beneficial to me as a human being. Is there somewhere in the Torah where it says you have to
Wait a
have
minute,
a
are you
relationship
doing
with
it
me?
because it's a benefit to you, or because you're commanded and you just need to show up
Because it's
you've
a
been told
benefit
to do
me
it?
and my family and my community. My life is so much better. I'm happier. My wife is happier. My children are reasonably happy for adolescence and 21 in.
But that's pretty transactional.
Yes. So all of those things to me are, wow, this works. This Sabbath thing, genius. This kosher thing, great idea to be sensitive to what you're about to put in your mouth. Man, this template is awesome for comporting yourself in life. And is there somewhere in the Torah where it says, and thou hast to be dude-like with me too? Because I don't know why.
You need to do something irrational.
I
That's
don't know
the problem.
why
It's too rational.
That's the part I'm always missing.
It's
like,
too rational.
Hey, I appreciate that. This works. This is great. You're
Right.
awesome. The universe is amazing.
Right.
Thank you. Possibility. Brilliant.
You're grateful.
I'm so grateful.
Okay, you're grateful.
Yes.
All right. Were you grateful? Are you grateful to your father
Yes.
for giving you life?
Yes.
And teaching you and giving you education,
Yes.
etc.?
Yes.
You love your dad?
Yes.
You love him a lot?
Yeah.
What is a natural consequence? What is an action that you do, a simple action, a verbal one, because you love your dad?
I go. He has Alzheimer's. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if I've shared this with you.
Yeah.
So I go and I read to him every week.
Okay.
So I read a book.
But I'm
to
getting
him.
at something simple. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a very great way to honor your father,
Yeah.
and that the sixth commandment is right up there with the top 10.
Yeah.
But did you ever say I love you to your dad?
Yeah.
Many times, probably.
Not many times because he wasn't great with it. He was like a 50s, 60s dad,
Are you grateful to your wife?
Oh, deeply.
Deb is amazing.
Yeah, deeply.
You say I love you to her?
All the time.
Okay, so part of your gratitude and love is saying I love you.
I see where you're going.
Have you ever said I love you to God?
No.
Could you?
I need to.
Try it. You don't have to do it right here on our
No,
show.
no,
It's a
no,
private
I get
thing.
it. I get it. No, these are the things I need to think about.
Yeah.
Trust me, it's not lost on me that I am so deeply appreciative of God and God-fearing and God-loving, and I've never really said I love you, other than thou art, you're awesome, stand, kneel, sit.
This is a Sal Litvak original, which shocks me. Like, I mean, honestly,
Not
to
easy
me,
to
it's
shock
the
you.
most simple, self-evident thing.
Yeah.
Every Jew is commanded to love God.
Yeah.
It is the fundamental prayer.
Yeah.
Right? We say it 3 times a day at least, if not more.
Yeah.
We hope that we'll say on our at the moment of our death.
Yeah.
Hear, O Israel, God, the Lord our God, the Lord is one.
Yeah.
The next line is, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your resources.
Yeah.
That's the essence of the Shema prayer.
Right. Not you shall appreciate the Lord
Not
your
you shall
God with
appreciate,
all
you
your
shall love.
Yeah.
And it's always a good question. Can you command love? I mean, Deb never said to you, you shall love me.
Correct.
Right?
Correct. And I'm adversarial by nature, so maybe I'm just pushing back on the commandment.
Maybe you're just pushing back.
Yeah.
But we all pretty much accept, okay, yeah, no problem. And then we feel that the way we express love is by doing the commandments.
Right.
By keeping kosher, by taking care of the poor, by taking care of the widow and the orphan, by learning Torah, by doing all the things that we do.
Right.
Or in your case, by putting all your guts and soul, into creating an experience that is fantastic for the reader and leads other creatures in the creation to think about their society and themselves and their actions, the consequences of their actions, what is freedom. I mean, there's wonderful things that are very Talmudic in nature that your book occasions in people, and that is a wonderful way to love the creation.
Right.
But it's all quite indirect compared to you're commanded to love God, so say, I love you, God.
Right.
And I started doing that years ago, and it's the most immediate way to be in relationship. And I say this to people all the time, and then they do it, and they're like, Sal, that was good.
Right.
It works,
Right.
because, and then you may not be sure what's going to come next, and you don't have to be. You could just wait. Just say it and then wait. Because there's no more direct way to actually be in the presence. We're always in God, but okay, I got to drive the carpool. I got to get this podcast on the road. I got to fix this microphone.
Right.
I got to fix the object, drive the object, pick up the kid. There's so many things to do.
Right.
And it's easy to forget. But if you want to be grateful, if you want to be present, and if you want to fulfill the commandment to love God, there's no more direct way than just say, I love you, God. And I recommend it to everybody.
I will definitely. It sounds weird to say. I will take that under consideration. No, it's quite fascinating.
I want more than that.
No. So here's
Just
the
try.
thing.
Say you'll try it.
Oh no, for sure I'll try it.
Beautiful.
No. For sure I'll try it. It's part of what my friend Lucas was saying. Was how could you be living this life? Obviously, observing the commandments and being a role model for people and being good, and not thinking about being good, just being it, because that's what God commands. How could you have all that and not have this relationship? And then you're taking it one step further, which is saying, how could you love this book he's giving you, these rules, this universe, and not say, hey, man, I love you, thank you, right?
Exactly.
Like, how's that missing? We can go back into on the couch and childhood trauma and all sorts of stuff. That maybe some of that is there.
Well, it's also part of the
Yeah.
intellectual tradition
Yeah.
of Judaism. I mean, we're just so we just over-intellectualize everything, and so this is a good way of stepping back. I think Christians have a much easier time with this.
Yes.
You won't hear a Jew say God is love. I think you will hear Christians say that a lot.
Yeah. Which is ironic because God is love. I honestly believe that.
Well, I don't. I think it's
Yeah.
too reductionist.
Yeah.
But
that's a good debate.
because you can't boil God down to any particular verb. I think.
I don't.
But I do think that God appreciates love, wants us to love each other, wants us to create love, wants us to create moments of love.
If you
I
think
think he's
about it,
loving. I don't think he only is love.
I think that love is so powerful, it's like the big bang of everything else. I think that what love does and heals and creates is the birth of every other aspect of God. I think
I would say that God
heart of
made the
God is love.
universe because of love. I would say that. I would agree with that.
Yeah,
It was a loving act.
I can more easily believe in the notion that the core and the essence of God is love, and that everything else scales out around that, than I can say that that's an aspect of God. He's also angry. He's also this. He's also that. That feels too, what's the word, anthropomorphic. So I don't know if I use that word correctly. That'll be interesting to go back on it. So to me, that, and it was what you and I discussed when I first walked in before the mics were on, with regards to my foster daughter, that we tried to figure out how many good days would a person need for all the bad days that they lived.
And so set that up a little bit. Tell us
Okay.
about your foster daughter.
So I have a foster daughter. She's 15, and I, even before she became my foster daughter, I was sort of, we were in this interim phase, and I had taken her surfing, and we were watching the waves come in, and we were trying to figure out how do you make up for the bad that happens in your life? And we figured out that, well, you need good days, because a good day can take you through a lot of bad days. And then we tried to break that down and figure, well, how many good days do you need? How many bad days? How do we do the math on this? And we figured out, well, let's just go with the Bible as an idea, because on the seventh day God rested. So obviously one day can make up, let's say you had 7 really bad days. Obviously that one day is pretty darn good. Mm-hmm. Let's use that as our
6 bad days.
6
set
bad
off
days
by the one day of
by
rest.
the one day.
Okay.
So we figured that she needed roughly 686 good days, right? But what's a good day? A good day is she's loved. Now, a good day is also that, that there are boundaries set, mm-hmm. that she learns that
she's coming into your home
correct.
From chaos.
Exactly right. So,
and you already have kids in your home, so
yes,
that's not the easiest thing either.
Right, that's not the easiest thing either. Oop, his microphone, sorry. But the umbrella overarching every single day that is good, by our definition, is love, unconditional. And that to me is the soul and core of everything. It is so healing, Sal, that it's hard for me to imagine that the other manifestations of God don't derive from that core. And that's why when I say God is love, I believe that is the central tenet of God, and probably the central thing we can all learn in how we navigate life.
Did you know this when you were a teenager?
No, not even close.
Did you know this when you were a young man, a young adult?
No.
A young newlywed?
No.
A young father?
Yes.
Okay, so that was the first change.
Yeah, young father, and then just as you get long in the tooth, you begin to appreciate things more and more, and you begin to realize just how important love is, and how detracting taking it away is, and the damage it does, and it takes on this great import, greater than all the other emotions, and you realize how central it is. And here's the most interesting thing to me. Like, I often tell people, I think there are 3 things that we need to do if we want to live life successfully. We need to love people proactively. We need to do something that's worthy of someone loving us. And this is the hardest. The third one is the hardest. We need to be able to accept that love. And humans are horrible at it. We're not good really at saying thank you. We're not good at, it's
interesting
nothing.
because you think that's counterintuitive.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be loved, and when love comes their way, what could be easier than
Right.
receiving love?
Right. But
And yet,
it's the human condition and I don't know why that is, to accept wholly and purely somebody's love for you. That's the hardest thing to do. And I think there's something
It's interesting. We become suspicious of it.
Yes, yes. Why is that?
As you're talking about this, I'm reminded. Did you ever read The Corrections, Jonathan Franzen's book?
No.
Very, very non-sci-fi book, right? Just a real kind of hard, closely observed human drama, dark. And I didn't love everything about that book. I didn't love that book like I love your book. I love you.
I'm slipping Sal a 20 under the table. Yeah, go ahead.
But there was a figure in that book, a trope that was so good. And it talked about how this one character, I think it was the mom in this family, kind of the matriarch, and she loved to compile evidence, right? And so she's sort of evaluating everyone around her and keeping close track of all the ways in which they've injured her and assuming this kind of moral superiority by having always available at her fingertips all the ways in which she's been wronged. And it's pretty easy to look down on her and even mock her and feel superior to her. But man, do we do that.
Yes.
We are so aware of the ways in which we've been wronged and so prone to not even notice the exact same ways in which we wrong others,
Yeah.
let alone keep track of the wrongs that we've done to others. In fact, when we've wronged another and we're kind of aware of it, we actually start to dislike that person because they remind us that we've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And so I think that, accepting love, giving love is just the opposite of this. It's the opposite of compiling evidence. I guess it would be compiling reasons to care, compiling reasons to...
It's believing you're worthy of it.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it is about the human condition that we don't think we're worthy of being loved. And I think that's really where that circles us back to God, because he loves us no matter what, even though there's a list of things that we have to do. We know he's going to love us. He created us, and there's a part of him in us. But I think there's this, I think the Christians got this part right? Even if you don't love yourself, Jesus loves you, right? Like that's, if you're a copywriter in advertising, I don't mean to diminish, an entire religion, but it's a powerful thought in a nutshell for a human condition.
Mm-hmm.
Judaism is harder and more exacting. We've got the 613 mitzvahs. You can't just be forgiven. You have to ask for forgiveness. We're tougher on that. But underneath it is a nice idea, which is the acknowledgement and the recognition that for whatever reason, so many of us just don't feel like we're worthy of the thank you, of the acknowledgement. And so in comes this philosophy that says, well, even if you don't, he does.
Right. He created you.
He created you.
He had a reason.
He had a reason. So there's a nice idea in that too. There's a nice idea in that too.
The Talmud teaches that every person should carry 2 slips of paper in his pocket, right? In one side it says the entire world was created so that I should be here. And the other is I'm nothing but dust and ashes.
Yes.
Right? And that it's that Judaism is all about the tension of holding both as true, simultaneously, completely.
Yeah.
Believing both with all your heart and soul. And I think a lot of us are good at I'm nothing but dust and ashes.
I agree.
But the other one, the whole world was created so that I should be and that I should be here right now. We just pay lip service to that. We don't really believe it.
And it's a problem.
Right.
Because if you look at it non-hubristically, it's saying all the little things that you do during the course of the day have a tremendous impact.
Right.
Know the name of the guard at the front door. Ask him about his children. That has a huge impact. Help this person. Clean this little thing up on the side of the road because you don't know if that thing's going to hit another cyclist coming by. All of these things are your impact and the ramifications that you had. I had this interesting conversation with my kid about who's more important, Rihanna or the mother who was helpful to Einstein's mother when she was really feeling down, and that really helped, and Einstein got the love that he needed and the care that he needed, and then grew up to be a genius. Nobody knows about the friend who helped Einstein's mom, but she performed an invaluable service for the world. Rihanna's probably a nice person who's got a great voice and sells lots of albums, but who is more important, arguably? Mm-hmm. And that's you are the most important person in the world, and you have no idea what good is going to come out of the good you do.
Right, and when that moment will come to do it. And you'll miss that moment if you're not awake to that possibility that you are important, that you were placed here for a reason. Once you have that mindset, okay, now you're looking out at the world and at your day. It's like, okay, well, I can do something. I have an ability. I have a position. I have an opportunity. Why was I sent here? Now you're looking for it. You're much less likely to miss it.
Should you
if
look
you're
for
looking
it?
For it?
So my argument is maybe you shouldn't even be looking for it. And the reason for that argument is if you believe that you're going through your day, not saying you shouldn't be doing important things or focused on something that's good, just being good as God commands us to be good spreads so much good into the universe. You don't have to wait for that moment to arrive. You simply have to be the good He's telling you to be.
Sure. I'm not saying it's
right.
You're just waiting for the one big moment when you're going to be there to pull the president out of traffic or of the speeding car.
Right.
But yes, that these little insignificant acts, but coming from a good place.
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Sure. Particularly when you don't feel like it.
Particularly when you don't feel like that's.
Right.
This was the hardest thing for me to learn. Right. I have my Zen moment in the morning where I open up the Wall Street Journal. I'm in my lazy boy. I have my cappuccino because I'm bougie that way. And then inevitably one of my kids would come in and say, Abba, I want to talk to you about something. And I live for that 40 minutes before work because work is crazy. And I had to learn how to lower that paper, close it so they knew they had my undivided attention, and be all ears. Because a human being is far more important than me catching up or reading a very clever op-ed. But it took me a while to get that.
Yeah.
That's what's so shocking is that it took me a while to get that.
Maybe an even tougher case is, let's say you and Deb got involved in some important chesed project, right? And you were doing something good that was going to affect a lot of people. Let's say you're working with this organization, Tomchei Shabbos, and you were going to, enable a bunch of families to have a Shabbat dinner that otherwise wouldn't have it, right? And so you're working on that, and you're behind, and so you got to fill, let's say, these last 10 boxes in the morning so that those people will have their dinners. So you're involved in an absolute good.
Yes.
And now your son comes in the kitchen and wants a little bit of your attention, just to talk about, some trade that the Dodgers made or something.
Yeah.
And
wow, what a great intellectual exercise.
and I have failed this test, many times. I'm like, I know I'm doing a good, so I'll say to him, just hold on a second, I got to get this thing done.
Yeah.
And then the moment passes and he goes off to school.
The moment passes. And
the moment
that is
passes,
like
and then
underlined, italic, and in bold, by
yes,
the way.
Exactly. The moment has passed.
Yeah.
And there's a finite number of mornings that he's going to come into that kitchen before going to school, before I wake up, and he graduated high school and he's gone from the house.
That's right. That's why it's underlined, bold, and italic. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I think about it all the time. And I fail those moments.
Yeah, I think we all do. Then, having failed them, we can't get so down on ourselves that we lose the opportunity to grow for the next time because we just say, I'm just that jerk. No. Today, you failed a test and learned from it. Tomorrow's a completely new opportunity.
Yeah. Rabbi Kanevsky had said it beautifully once, and I'm paraphrasing. It's, your kids will overcome the mistakes that you make and still love you. So that's good, and it's true. But the older you get, the wiser you get in terms of recognizing that that moment passed and you're not getting it back. and there aren't going to be a lot of them. So even though your kids will forgive you, you need to be wise enough to grab onto those moments, and then ultimately forgive yourself. But yeah.
Amen. I want to commend you, for giving your foster daughter a chance to make some of these good days happen, and that you can help her find some of those good days.
Me and Deborah.
And your kids.
And our kids.
Your sons and your daughter. I mean, it cannot be easy to bring a teenager brand new into a home situation.
It is not easy. Yeah.
But that's a real chesed. It's not that difficult to receive an email and there's an appeal for some. All right, I'll send him $36. I feel good about myself. I sent some charity.
Yeah.
But it really only took a second and it didn't take much. But to give that of yourself and your time and your home.
Yes. So here's the irony, or what's so interesting, and Deb and I have talked about this a few times. That only took a second. We didn't even discuss it. And I'm not saying that to say, we didn't even,
It was just a given that we're saints.
Right. It was one of those things where it seemed to us, and so this is my struggle or continuing struggle when people say, that's so great that you did that. And I always say back to them, and I seem to always be wrong when I say this back, if your son or daughter came in and said, Abba, I have a friend who's in real trouble. We need to protect her. And then you met this kid, and there was nobody else out there for her. I can't possibly imagine you saying, full up tonight. Molly, sorry. Not going to happen. I think you would probably do whatever you could to help her. And then when you realized that there was nobody else out there, this is the moment we talk about. There is no choice. You've been trained by God. You understand the good that you need to do. You even understand that it might not work. Implicit in this mitzvah is that it might not work. Aurora may not be able to, get along, or some dynamic won't happen. That doesn't matter. What matters is that there is a life right here, right now, and you have been equipped to be a parent, and you have been given this opportunity right here, right now. There's no other opportunity for her. Is there a choice? As far as Deborah and I were concerned, we didn't discuss it. There was no choice. And I don't think that you would have seen it as a choice either. And people say, well, yeah, not true. I can't believe it. I can't believe that you would say no. Maybe I'm wrong. And I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm really asking that question or saying that as the moment that it occurred to us, knowing you, I would like to think that if the situation were reversed, you'd be asking me the same question.
I'd like to believe I would have made the same choice. It's unknowable. But I do think that when these moments come up in life, we're more likely to do the right thing if we've been rehearsing doing the right thing in smaller stakes.
Amen. Yeah, I agree. That's God.
Yeah.
That's the template. That's what's worked for us. And that's what I come back to, which is I'm so grateful, and I love my wife, and I love my children, and I love my life because of these commandments I've been following, which have taught me to slow down and appreciate going to the bathroom and the little things. Over time, it sets you up for that moment, as you said. I got to figure out the I love you part, and I need to ask you for something part. Okay.
Dani, thank you. Thank you for coming in today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for
on the
inviting
AT
me.
Podcast.
I had no idea what was going to... I remember saying, do I need to study up on something? And you said the entire Talmud. I said, okay. I know what kind of meeting this is.
I'm glad it came in handy for you.
Yes, thank you.
All right.